Hello and welcome to a bonus opening day episode of the Days of Roar podcast. I'm Evan Petzold, the Tigers beat writer for the Detroit Free Press, and I'm joined by my co-host, Chris Brown from Tigers Minor League Report. The Kevin McGonigle era is underway. How about that?
That was a special performance. About as good a debut as you could possibly imagine. I think it's the second Tigers rookie ever to have 4 hits in his debut. But beyond that, the results were amazing. But you got to see just about everything that he can do. You saw, the pure hitting ability, the bat speed, the power. He nearly hit a home run. The speed. And kind of most of the instincts. His instincts are just immaculate. So like both of his doubles could have been singles if he didn't bust it out of the box. He dodged a tag. He beat on an infield single. He scored on a Parker Meadows kind of, bloop shot that he just got a perfect read on. Later on, he made a defensive play where he cut in front of Javi Baez. Like he didn't worry about offending the veteran, right? He just makes the right baseball play. And the result was, an amazing debut. I think he's going to have a hard time, living up to that every game. And he's not going to get 4 knocks every game. But what you saw today is the player that Kevin McGonigle is. And he's got a chance to be really, really special.
I think Riley Green said it best when he said that it seemed like it was Kevin McGonigle's 700th MLB game, not his MLB debut. But of course, it was his MLB debut. So much happened in this game. Not only did Kevin McGonigle make the opening day roster, which we'll get into, but 25th player in MLB history to collect 4 hits in his debut. And he did it on opening day, batting 6th and playing third base. The Tigers won 8-2 against the San Diego Padres. It was Thursday at Petco Park, led by McGonigle and none other than 3-time opening day starter, 2-time American League Cy Young winner, Tarik Skubal. Right now, those guys are the favorites for AL Rookie of the Year and AL Cy Young, and are off to a good start, as are the Tigers. You really couldn't have asked for a better opening day. Like the plate appearances in the first few innings, they were just outstanding against Nick Pivetta, who could not locate his fastball. And then Kevin McGonigle, of course, has 4 hits in 5 trips to the plate, including a double on the first pitch he saw in the first inning. Tarik Skubal, he tosses 6 innings of 1-run ball, but it was an unearned run. So the ERA is 000 after 1 start. His fastball command, I didn't think it was great, but the changeup, that was dynamite. And once the Padres got into swing mode against him, I thought he did a really good job of taking advantage by getting early count outs to keep his pitch count low. Only 74 pitches across 6 innings. And then even Javi Baez, of all players, won the first ABS challenge in Tigers history. He overturned a strike into a ball and then hit a single on the next pitch. And most importantly, the Tigers got a win. They're 1-0 to start the 2026 season. And doesn't it feel great knowing that they're 1-0 and Framber Valdez is going to start in game 2 with a chance to win their first series of the season? Like having Tarik Skubal 1, Framber Valdez 2, I don't think it gets much better than that, especially when you win that game 1, going into game 2, knowing you have another horse going out on the mound for you.
It's kind of funny to me that getting Framber Valdez kind of feels like the 4th story for the Tigers this year. You've got Skubal, you got McGonigle, you got Verlander coming back, and then, oh, by the way, the biggest pitching contract you've ever signed, or at least the most expensive annual value. And that's amazing. So you go out there and, it's funny. I think on our last show, it was like, the Tigers have never hit Nick Pivetta very well. They only scored 7 runs in 27 innings, and then they go 6 runs and, however many innings. That's the beauty of baseball, right? It never makes any sense. But so you got another great pitching matchup tomorrow against Michael King. And then you have, I think, I touched on it before, Randy Vasquez in game 3. I don't think he's particularly good. So you got a chance to win the series for sure and maybe even sweep. But, you don't want to put the cart before the horse. But really, really a good start to the season, about as well as you could ask for. The only, Kerry Carpenter didn't get any hits. Drew Anderson looked a little rough, a little nervous maybe. But beyond that, and Skubal, his excellence was almost kind of boring today. Like if it makes sense, he was just it was 2 hits in the first inning, and then he got the next 15 batters on I think 48 pitches. It took him to get the next 15 outs. Just like Greg Maddux out there, just getting early outs. And then when he needed strikeouts, he got them. And if this were a more important game, he probably could have gone, or a closer game, he could have gone another inning, maybe 2, but they had a big lead. So they, took him out early and gave some other guys a chance. But really strong overall performance by the team.
Let's take you inside the clubhouse. Here's what Tarik Skubal said about the opening day win, 8-2 over the Padres.
It's great. We're 1-0. That's the most important thing. 1-0 with an opportunity to win a series tomorrow with Framber going. So winning is the most important thing in this game, and to start the season 1-0 is a big step. And it's, I want to be 2-0 after tomorrow, and when we win tomorrow, you want to be 3-0, and have a winning, road trip, and then we get home and get to play in front of our own fans. So winning is the most important thing.
And then here's what Tarik Skubal said about Kevin McGonigle, his historic debut, the first Tigers player with 4 hits in his debut since the late Billy Beane in 1987.
I mean, he's a special talent, obviously. I said it yesterday. He doesn't need any help. He just needs to be Kevin. And he's a really good baseball player, and he proved it today. But what I love about him is I don't think he's gonna think about today, tomorrow. I think he's gonna come to the yard and have a fresh slate, get ready to go to work again, and that speaks to who he is as a human. Just as a competitor, and I'm excited that he's on our club.
So let's get into Kevin McGonigle making the opening day roster, because that's been the biggest news this week. It happened Tuesday morning at about 9 a.m., pretty much 52 hours before opening day. And here's the story of how it went down. Kevin McGonigle, he wakes up at like 8 a.m. on Tuesday in his hotel room in Scottsdale, Arizona, just before the final spring training game against the Colorado Rockies. And he has a text message on his phone that reads, "Meeting at 8:55 a.m. And he knew exactly what it meant. The team had a breakfast before that meeting, but Kevin said he couldn't eat. That's how nervous he was to find out whether he would make the opening day roster or end up packing his bags and going to AAA Toledo. I thought it was cool, by the way, when Kevin said that he started thinking about making the opening day roster in the offseason, back when he got his invite to MLB spring training. It's not that he expected to make the opening day roster, but that's when he figured he had a chance to make it. And he told himself back then that he would do everything he could to make the team. I think that tells you, like, when this kid sets his mind to something, he is going to find a way, even if the odds are stacked against him. Even, for the rest of the story, he finally meets with AJ Hinch. That happens 8:55 a.m. And AJ gives him the runaround for like 10 minutes before finally getting in the news that he made the Tigers opening day roster. During that meeting, AJ called Kevin a winning player. And I think that's when Kevin first got the sense that he was going to make the team. But then he had to just wait for AJ to officially say it. And once it happens, of course, he calls his parents, he calls his friends, he calls his agent. Like, it sounds like it was a really special moment for everyone. Definitely one that Kevin's never going to forget. And now he's in the big leagues. Like, we've been talking about it all spring. Now that it's happened, what do you think about the Tigers' decision to put Kevin McGonigle, a 21-year-old who hasn't played above AA Erie, onto the opening day roster?
I think it was the right decision. I think, there are a lot of talented baseball players out there, and McGonigle has a ton of talent. But I think what won them over was his approach and his mentality the whole way. And it talked about it, or Skubal talked about it. The thing that he likes about McGonigle is that he's not going to live off this 4-hit performance. He's going to go out there and do it all again tomorrow, or try, have another approach. And he even heard him in the post game interview talking about how he's just glad he helped them get a win. And I think that's, when Hinch is talking about a winning baseball player, that's the sort of thing that they mean. He's a guy that just wants to contribute to wins, and he's got a lot of different ways to do it. And I think, I don't know if Scott Harris and AJ Hinch would ever tell anybody, but I feel like they decided fairly early on that he was going to make the team. I don't know about early on, but I don't think they waited until the very end. I think they knew for a while.
Well, one thing to note about that is that Scott Harris, Jeff Greenberg, AJ Hinch, the leaders of the Tigers, they talked in the offseason about the chances of Kevin McGonigle making the opening day roster. And back in the offseason, as they were preparing for spring training, they all decided to keep an open mind about it. I thought that was really impressive, that it wasn't like slamming that door shut. They allowed that door to be cracked open a little bit. And then, of course, McGonigle, with his performance, really opens that door wide, and he ends up running through that door and making the opening day roster. But I do commend the Tigers for keeping that door open. 22 games for Kevin McGonigle in spring training. He hit .286 with a 20.6% walk rate and a 17.5% strikeout rate. That was across 63 plate appearances. It was smart swing decisions. It was elite bat to ball skills. It was an advanced approach at the plate. He showed he could handle shortstop and third base. Those are the biggest questions coming into camp was what does he look like defensively? He answered those questions with continued development of his pre-pitch preparation, putting him in position to make every play. It was outstanding what he was able to do in spring training. And you can't say that he didn't earn it because he definitely earned it. And if he wins Rookie of the Year, then the Tigers are going to get a draft pick. I thought it was, again, commendable that they could have, if they wanted to, they could have kept him down for 2 weeks. And if he failed to win Rookie of the Year upon his promotion, then the Tigers would have gained an extra year of club control before he reached free agency. They also could have kept him down until mid-August, and that could have set them up to get not only a draft pick, but it also could have given them the extra year of club control. So they could have gotten the best of both worlds rather than one or the other, but instead they just said, you know what? We want to win the World Series. Kevin McGonigle gives us the best chance to do so. Let's put him on the roster now. Don't care about service time. AJ Hinch said it. Service time was not a point of discussion in any of his conversations with Scott Harris or Jeff Greenberg. I think that tells you a lot about where the Tigers are at as an organization and where they're at in terms of their commitment to winning at the big league level right now. All right, I want to get into what everyone had to say about this. So let's start with manager AJ Hinch on Tuesday morning. Here's what he said about the decision to put Kevin McGonigle on the opening day roster.
He continued to demonstrate his ability to handle the moment. And he had a lot of moments during camp where he was tested, whether that's playing in a crazy environment in the Dominican, whether it was the first day of spring, I started him at shortstop against the Yankees. Working the field with Javi and Glaber and Torque, established big leaguers, and he continued to hold his own. The at-bat quality was as advertised. I think his defense was really impressive with the details of his first step, his pre-pitch, completing plays. He never looked uncomfortable throughout the spring, even though he will tell you there were some nerve-wracking moments. And he should be nervous. He's 21 and has never played with this much attention on him, albeit one of the top prospects in baseball. So when I met with him, he made no assumptions. He didn't know, where he stood other than he was given a ton of opportunity to, including last night when you come in and he's playing amongst every player that started last night pretty much knew, they were on this team.
And here's what President of Baseball Operations Scott Harris said Wednesday afternoon, also discussing the decision to put Kevin McGonigle on the opening day roster.
Yeah, I think the determining factors for us when considering him for the opening day roster were, one, can he make us better? And two, is he ready developmentally for this jump? I think his performance in games in Lakeland, and especially the work that we saw behind the scenes, convinced us that the answer to those two questions is yes. And so he's here. We think his command of the strike zone, his ability to execute a game plan at the plate, and his ability to help us defensively are going to insulate him from some of the struggles that young players see. I will say, we shouldn't be surprised if there are growing pains here. He's 21 years old. He's going to be in the big leagues. We just trust him mentally and physically to be able to fight through some of the adjustment period here. And the other factor is, if you think about us as an organization right now, we don't need him to be the savior. We don't need him to carry us. We just need him to help us. This roster is pretty darn good with him or without Kevin. We just think it's better with him on it. That's why he's here.
And finally, here's what Kevin McGonigle said Wednesday afternoon, looking ahead to his MLB debut in Thursday's opening day against the Padres.
Yeah, I feel like, I've always been good at just telling myself it's the same game, and I'm going to have the same mindset going in tomorrow. I know it's going to be in front of 45,000 fans. I know it's at the biggest stage, but I've dreamed about being there my whole life, and I feel like my mindset leading up to this point has always been well, and I continue to keep that mindset. And first pitch might be a little tough, might be a little nervous, but after that first pitch, I'm hoping, it's go time from there.
Yeah, you heard a little bit of all there. I think the thing we've been talking about and what Scott Harris said is that he makes the team better. It's, there's a lot of noise about being a prospect and age and all those other things, but ultimately at the end, you have to evaluate the player, and they've realized this is a guy who plays position of need, two positions of need, really. He could play third and shortstop, and he's likely going to be one of their better offensive players this year. So it's it wasn't a no-brainer. Obviously, there are a lot of things that go into it. You touched on the service time, but if they're trying to win, he's the type of guy you need. So I like what everybody said about it.
And then Thursday comes around and you've got Colt Keith with the first hit of the season, but Gleyber Torres, Riley Green, Spencer Torkelson, all of them walked against Nick Pivetta. And then up comes Kevin McGonigle. And this guy reminds us that, yes, he is a very selective hitter. Yes, we love the smart swing decisions. Yes, we love the bat to ball skills. We love that he can work a walk as good as anyone. But he reminds us all that he is also an aggressive hitter. Because he gets a first one he sees in his entire MLB career, up and in cutter, and he pulls it down the right field line for a 2-run double. It puts the Tigers ahead 3-0 in the first inning. For those who don't know, and maybe Nick Pivetta didn't know, Kevin McGonigle loves fastballs on the inner half of the plate, especially up and in. Like, this league is going to learn very quickly that you cannot throw him pitches there, or he is going to pull them into what I think we should just start calling McGonigle Corner. The right field corner. We are going to see a lot of balls hit into McGonigle Corner throughout this guy's career. He did it on the first pitch of the first game of his MLB career. Remember what he said about being nervous for the first pitch? Well, here's what he said after the game.
Yeah, I was nervous. It's weird. I feel like right when I started my load to hit, it just went away. And but yeah, I felt great out there. Very, very confident. I'm looking to keep that same mindset.
How cool is that? Chris, what did you think when you were watching as Kevin McGonigle stepped to the plate with the bases loaded, then he swings at the first pitch, and then he pulls it into right field, and all of a sudden it's a 2-run double? Like, it was definitely a moment that I'll never forget, not only as the Tigers beat writer, but as a person who just loves the game of baseball and is understanding that maybe we are watching one of the game's next superstars.
Yeah, it was one of those things where I had like multiple thoughts go through my head at first, but then it kind of all happened too quickly to have, too deep of internal monologue with it. But I was like, wow, wouldn't it be cool if he had a grand slam? I was like, it's his first at bat. Just get a productive out, bring the run home, and then bam, double down the line. Like, oh, wow. All right. Well, there you go. That's like, well, that's a great start. No matter what else he does this game, that's a great way to start your career. And then, he just kept performing.
Yeah, did you see 3 more hits coming? He had another double in the third inning. Once again, up and in fastball from Pivetta. What does he do? He turns on it and smokes it off the wall in the right field corner, a.k.a. McGonigle Corner. 106-mile-an-hour exit velocity on that one. He loves that fastball on the inner half of the plate. I don't think there's any way the Padres throw him one of those in Friday's game. I think he's going to see a bunch of junk, and he's probably going to draw his first walk in the big leagues. But then he had that infield single in the 5th inning, and the sprint speed on that was 30.2 feet per second. Anything over 30 feet per second is considered elite. So we can officially say Kevin McGonigle has elite speed as well as the elite hit tool. And then in the 9th inning, he got a sinker, another type of fastball on the inside part of the plate. Once again, he turned on it and he sent it into right field, this time for a single. So 3 fastballs on the inner half of the plate, resulting in 3 of his 4 hits. I think that tells you everything you need to know about what he likes as a hitter, what his strengths are. And then I'm going to leave you with one final stat. On Thursday, both Kevin McGonigle and Boston Red Sox outfielder Roman Anthony, they joined a list of 13 other players aged 21 or younger to reach base 4 times on opening day. Of the 13 other players, 9 of them are Hall of Famers, including Mickey Mantle, Brooks Robinson, Robert Alomar, Ken Griffey Jr., and Joe Mauer. So that is pretty good company for Kevin McGonigle and Roman Anthony. And they joined on Thursday. Probably gives you an idea of what the long-term highest upside is for both of those young players. So we saw all this in game 1. You got any expectations for Kevin McGonigle in game 2? Maybe 5 hits?
5 homers? No, like you said, Michael King has a really good changeup. We see that there are ways to attack McGonigle and get him out. If you make a mistake, and big league pitchers do make mistakes, he's going to punish it. It wouldn't shock me if he gets another knock and maybe a walk, but maybe a strikeout or 2 too. So he's a human. So you just and I'd like to see him steal a base too. That might be fun.
All right, I want to shift gears and get into some other opening day roster decisions. On the position player side, Parker Meadows over Wenzel Perez. We have been talking about that battle all spring. Both of them were not going to make the team if Kevin McGonigle made the team. And so once Kevin McGonigle made the team, it became Parker Meadows, Wenzel Perez. Do you agree with the decision to put Parker Meadows on the opening day roster and send Wenzel Perez to AAA Toledo?
I do. I think Meadows just has a higher ceiling. If he's the best version of himself, he's another guy who makes the team significantly better on both sides of the ball. Now, Wenceel Perez has been a quality player, and he is a quality player, and I wouldn't be shocked at all if he comes up this year and gets a 200, 300 at bats based on, injuries and things like that. But I think that the perfect version of this roster has Parker Meadows patrolling center and McGonigle playing somewhere on the left side of the infield. I think that was the right choice.
Yeah, both those guys, Wenceel Perez, Parker Meadows, they struggled in spring training, but the biggest difference between the two of them was Parker Meadows was trending upward as the Tigers were preparing to make that decision. Like, we saw some things start to come around for him. And then ultimately, when you looked at both of them and you kind of took a peek under the hood to learn more about what actually went into their spring struggles, they were complete opposites. When it comes to Wenceel Perez, like, he was hitting the ball harder, but he had way more swing and miss and way more chase. Like, just was not swinging at good pitches and was missing a lot, not putting the ball in play. But when he did make contact, he was making impact. Whereas Parker Meadows, not much impact, but he was making a lot of contact and he had a lot better swing decisions. So the Tigers, not only did they take the upside in Parker Meadows and the defense in Parker Meadows, they took the guy who was trending in the right direction, and they took the guy who was putting the ball in play, who was swinging at good pitches. Like, that is what this team needs if they want to take a step forward offensively. I think the fact that Parker Meadows was able to do that in spring, that gave him a leg up from the onset. And then once he started to trend in the right direction, that pretty much sealed the deal for him being on the opening day roster. And as for Wenceel Perez, he's going to have to go down to AAA Toledo, get himself back in the strike zone. If he's able to do that, we are going to see him in the big leagues again at some point this season, maybe for a long stretch, because he is a switch hitter. AJ Hinch loves having that switch hitter on the bench. I'll be curious if something happens, who gets that call though? Is it Wenceel Perez? Is it Trey Cruz? That'll be something to watch if the Tigers do end up wanting a switch hitter on their bench. Just something to monitor as the season rolls on. On the pitching side, Brant Herter was always on the team, even though I guess that kind of got taken down to the wire and the Tigers had to, let him know on the last day, oh, by the way, you made it. Brant Herter was always going to make the team. And Manuel DeJesus, he solidified himself a couple of weeks ago. And then it seemed like Brendan Hanafy was set for that final spot until the Tigers made an out-of-nowhere signing in Connor Seabold, who had been released by the Toronto Blue Jays after exercising an opt-out clause in his contract. Once that happened, the Tigers pounced and they signed Connor Seabold, and he immediately made the opening day roster because he signed a 1-year, $800K major league contract without any minor league options. So he couldn't be sent down to the minors. He couldn't be sent to AAA without being exposed to waivers. So with that being said, Brendan Hanafy just became the guy on the outside looking in. So he was ultimately optioned to AAA Toledo. So I know Brant Herter was in that mix and Emmanuel DeJesus and Brendan Hanafy, but what it really came down to was Connor Seabold over Brendan Hanafy. Do you agree with that decision?
It was really out of nowhere. I thought there was going to be Bert Smith over Brendan Hanafy, and it was another terrific lesson in not paying attention to these reliever battles at the end of the spring because somebody might come from nowhere. And I've discussed before that they tried to put Hanafy in the situations that they would use him in the regular season, men on base, and he didn't perform in those situations. It doesn't mean, again, it's like Perez. It doesn't mean we won't see him later in the year, but they didn't see what they wanted to see from him in spring. And Seabold, he doesn't have a stellar track record of the big leagues by any means, but apparently they really liked what they saw from him in spring training, which was a lot of swing and miss. He does have a lower arm angle than anybody else on the staff right now in the bullpen. And we know sometimes they like to give hitters different looks. So maybe that was a small part of it. But yeah, it was a shocker to me. And it was an equally shocking when they DFA'd Dylan Smith to make room for Kevin McGonigle. But again, the same idea with Hanafy is sometimes, life as a right-handed middle reliever is not terribly stable because there are an awful lot of pitchers like that out there.
The Connor Seabold signing in general, it just surprised me. I guess when you look at what he was able to do with the fastball, specifically the fact that it was, 94 miles an hour, that's where it was sitting in spring training with the Blue Jays. It also had a 45% whiff rate. So that was really impressive. Like, this was a guy who was throwing harder than he ever had, and he was missing more bats than he ever had, specifically with the fastball. That's going to be his go-to pitch. But yeah, no track record in the big leagues whatsoever. And I feel bad for Brendan Hanafy. I understand the fact that he is one-dimensional, and that makes it really difficult. He gets absolutely shelled by left-handed hitters, but he's really good against right-handed hitters. So even if you get into a situation where there are runners on base and you have a dangerous right-handed hitter coming up to the plate and maybe there's nobody on the bench, or it's a star, it's a superstar caliber right-handed hitter, and there's 2 outs in an inning and you want to bring Brennan Hanifee in just for that one at-bat because of how elite he is against right-handed hitters, to me, that seemed like the perfect role for him, especially if Connor Seabold, Brennan Hanifee, like if there's going to be your last guy in the bullpen anyway, and you have enough length in guys like Emmanuel DeJesus and Brant Herter and Drew Anderson, I feel like you could afford to have a 1 out type of guy in your bullpen where you hold on to him just for that perfect moment each series where you need him. That seemed to make some sense to me with Brennan Hanifee, but the Tigers decided otherwise. And I do feel bad because, believe it or not, Brennan Hanifee in the big leagues, it's been 94 1/3 innings. It's a 2.77 ERA. So he has a sub-3 ERA in nearly 100 innings in the big leagues. He has the track record. Connor Seabold does not, but the Tigers ended up going that direction. They were really impressed with Seabold's fastball and the whiff rate on that fastball in particular. We will see if it holds up at the big league level. Some general Tigers topics we got to discuss, and then we'll fly through some general MLB topics before we get out of here. One question for every Tigers player on the opening day roster. Thank you so much, Chris Brown, for helping me with this project for Freep.com. It's something that I try to do every year. And some years you come down to the wire and you're like, oh my gosh, it's 9 p.m. and opening day is the next day. I got to scramble to get something put together. You were very helpful in helping me come up with each of the individual questions for the players on the 26-man opening day roster. So one question for every player. We're not going to go through all of them. I just want to ask, what is the one question that you are most interested in following throughout this season? Because there are a lot of really good storylines with each of these players.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember some of the things that I sent you, but I guess the one that sticks out to me is what kind of consistency we can see from Spencer Torkelson this year. Can he put together 2 consecutive solid seasons? Can he get better? Is it because he had the 30 home runs and then it was really down again, and then 30 home runs last year, and it would just be nice to really have that consistent right-handed bat in your lineup. I think it would be a huge factor for them. So I'm going to be looking to see if he can be consistent at all in that regard. And then on the pitching side, I think it's fun to have Justin Verlander back, obviously, and just want to see if he could stay healthy. If he has that kind of magical last run in him that for the love of the game, Billy Chappell, has another one of those games where it's no hits through 7 innings. Just following him through this season, I think is going to be really fun for a lot of Tigers fans.
For me, on the position player side, it revolves around Matt Vierling. I think he's such an interesting piece of this team. It's so easy to forget that you go back to Matt Vierling in 2024, he was pretty much a 3-WAR player. Like, that's a real dude on this team. And you also can't forget either that Matt Vierling, early in his career, he was playing center field for the Phillies in the World Series. So this is a guy who has been there, done that. And he also has a season like he had in 2024 to back it up. I'm very curious to see Matt Vierling limited to just 31 games due to injuries last season. It was a really underrated absence for the Tigers. Coming off that career best season, he's been a leader behind the scenes. I think he has a real chance to reestablish his value on the field and maybe work his way into being an everyday player. I'm pretty high on Matt Vierling going into the year. I think that he has a real chance to emerge and become a difference maker. That's a storyline that I'm definitely watching. And then Casey Mize is another name on the pitching side. He's someone that I'm fascinated to see how this all unfolds. I think the big question that you had sent over to me was, will the splitter be useful? And I think that's ultimately going to define maybe an even bigger question beyond that, which is, does he stay in the rotation or does he move to the bullpen? He needs his splitter to be effective in the rotation. I think if you were to put him in the bullpen and give Casey Mize an opportunity to pitch in 1 inning or 2 inning bursts, maybe he doesn't need that consistency with the splitter in the same way that he does as a starter. So I think that splitter is really going to be what defines Casey Mize. Yes, he's coming off an all-star season. Yeah, he improved his walk rate. Yeah, he took his strikeout rate to the next level, but he also had a 5.54 ERA in his final 13 starts last season. And then it's been absolutely rocky in spring training. Now he goes into the season. How's that all going to hold up? I really do think the splitter is going to define a lot of things for him. 1, can he stay in the rotation? And 2, what does his free agency look like? Because that's looming as well. And it's a real chance to get paid. He's going to need his splitter in order to do that. Last thing on the Tigers before we get into some general Major League Baseball stuff. The World Series. Is it World Series or bust for the Tigers in 2026?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know if you can ever go into the season saying we're definitely going to win the World Series, right? But this is a good team. They spent a lot of money for them, obviously, to go out there and, they brought up their best young prospect. I think this is a team built to go on a long playoff run. And I think it's the goal, right? Like they've gotten a taste of the playoffs the last 2 years and come up bitterly short both times. And I think, that there's only so many chances you get. This is a relatively young team and you feel like the window is there, but Skubal may be gone next year and who knows what's going on in the future. So I really do think that they need to go all in this year. And I do think that includes making some real tough trades at the deadline if they have an obvious need. Now we'll see what happens. They might not have any obvious needs at that point, but yeah, so I think it's World Series or bust. Go for it.
I think once we get to the trade deadline, the Tigers could use some swing and miss in their bullpen. I think that's going to be an area of need once again, and we'll see if they attack it. But on the first day of spring training, AJ Hinch said, quote, "We're back at the bottom of the mountain again with clear goals," end quote. And then on the last day of spring training, he's talking about Kevin McGonigle, but what is he working there? "We're trying to win the World Series." And then he said some things about Kevin McGonigle and then end quote. I think that tells you exactly where the Tigers are at. I mean, they have a rotation that is built to win the World Series. Framber Valdez, Tarik Skubal, Jack Flaherty, Casey Mize, Justin Verlander. They've got the bullpen. And yeah, there are some swing and miss concerns, but it's Kenley Jansen, Kyle Finnegan, Will Vest. Those are some real names. And then you look at the offense. I think the offense will determine how far the Tigers ultimately go. Like they struggled with the strikeouts, but they were an above average offense for most of last season. And they had that late season collapse. I think when you talk about Kevin McGonigle coming aboard, that's one thing, but it's not just Kevin McGonigle. He doesn't have to be the answer. It's really the core. It's Riley Green. Can he cut down on the strikeout? Spencer Torkelson. Can he avoid the regression? Kerry Carpenter. Let's stay healthy. Colt Keith. Let's unlock some more power. I think as those four position players enter the primes of their careers, we're going to find out what this team is really made of. And then you have Gleyber Torres, near the top of the lineup. He's going to be that veteran presence, that on-base machine. We've seen the flashes from the offense. I think if we see that consistency, this has all the makings of a team. If they can add a little bit of swing and miss to their bullpen at the trade deadline, that could make it all the way to the World Series. So they've set those expectations. And then when you look at what their roster is, yeah, to me, it is World Series or bust. No more Tarik Skubal after 2026. That's how it seems. So what better time than now to win it all? All right, some non-Tigers related topics really quick, then we're going to get out of here. Predictions. I want your 6 playoff teams from the American League and from the National League.
All right. Well, I've got in the American League, I got the Red Sox, Tigers, and Mariners winning their division, and the Yankees, Blue Jays, and the Athletics. The Athletics making the playoffs as wild cards. And then in the National League, I have the Phillies, Brewers, and Dodgers winning the division, and then the Cubs, Mets, and Braves as the wild card.
For me, in the American League, AL East, Boston Red Sox, AL Central, Detroit Tigers, AL West, Seattle Mariners. We're the same way there. That's my 1 through 3 as well in terms of the seeding. I think the Boston Red Sox are really dangerous. I think that rotation, I know we love the Tigers rotation, but that Red Sox rotation is filthy. And then for the wild card, in the 4 spot, Toronto Blue Jays, the 5, Kansas City Royals, and 6, Baltimore Orioles, with the Yankees not making the playoffs. That's my hot take. Yours is the Athletics, of course. In the National League, NL West, Los Angeles Dodgers, NL East, Philadelphia Phillies, NL Central, Chicago Cubs. That is my 1 through 3 in the seeding. And then the wild card, the 4 spot, San Diego Padres, the 5 spot, Milwaukee Brewers, and the 6 spot, New York Mets. And then Chris, what is your World Series matchup with your winner?
So I have the Red Sox over the Tigers in the ALCS. Sorry to say that to those who want to relive 2013. And then I have the Braves over the Phillies in the NLCS. The Dodgers don't make it. I'm just envisioning this magical Braves season out of nowhere. I don't know. When you're making these predictions, it's fun to just come up with nonsense.
And then who do you have winning the World Series?
Oh, I'm sorry. I have the Red Sox over the Braves. Yeah, I just think you touched on it, that their rotation is really good, but then they've got a lot of really good young players. Roman Anthony, you touched on earlier. You got Ceddanne Rafaela, you got Luis Abreu. You have some other talent. Marcelo Meyer, we still don't know what he's going to be. Christian Campbell at this time last year looked like he was going to be Rookie of the Year. Who knows what he could become? And so and then they have depth for their pitchers. You've got Crochet and Ranger Suarez and Sonny Gray, but then you also have Peyton Tolley and Connerly Early coming up early. They just have a lot of pieces there. And I don't think they'd be afraid to trade some of their minor leaguers to get another big piece. So they seem good enough, right?
It's a really good team. That Boston Red Sox team is dangerous. And I'm in the same boat as you. ALCS, I have Red Sox over Tigers. Again, sorry to break the hearts of all the Tigers fans. I don't know, great minds maybe think alike here, but we're both envisioning a Red Sox over Tigers. And then, of course, in the National League, Dodgers over Phillies. And then in the World Series, I have the Dodgers over the Red Sox. Yes, I am predicting the Dodgers to win 3 in a row, which hasn't happened since the Yankees won 4 times in a row from 1998 to 2000. I just think the Dodgers are that good. And then 2027 is going to come around. They're going to grab Tarik Skubal as well. And then they're going to win it again and they're going to four-peat. I mean, I just think the Dodgers are that good and that dangerous. That's why I've got the Dodgers winning. I'm just not going to bet against Shohei Ohtani and the rest of those guys over there in LA. It's a really good team. All right. And then AL, NL MVP, AL, NL Cy Young, AL, NL Rookie of the Year, and then AL, NL Manager of the Year. All the awards races. I'll start with this one. AL MVP, Bobby Witt Jr., AL Cy Young, Cole Ragans. So I have 2 Royals there. Bobby Witt Jr. for the AL MVP, Cole Ragans for the AL Cy Young. Then for AL Rookie of the Year, Tatsuya Imai from the Houston Astros. I think he is going to win AL Rookie of the Year. And then AL Manager of the Year, Craig Albernaz from the Baltimore Orioles. I think if the Orioles are able to get into the playoffs, then when you look at their team, you can really talk me into that offense being good. And you can start to talk me into them actually having some real pitching this time, even though I think they are like one Framber Valdez caliber pitcher away from being a legit threat. Like I do think that what they have right now is enough to get them in the playoffs. If that happens, I do think Craig Albernaz wins AL Manager of the Year. Then in the National League, the MVP, who's going to bet against Shohei Ohtani? Certainly not me. NL Cy Young, I'm going Christopher Sanchez from the Philadelphia Phillies. A lot of people are going to pick Paul Skeens. I understand why. That's a very popular pick because he's not Tarik Skubal. If it's not Tarik Skubal, then Paul Skeens is the best pitcher on the planet. But I'm going to go Christopher Sanchez in this one. NL Rookie of the Year, Nolan McLean from the Mets, and then NL Manager of the Year is Craig Counsell from the Chicago Cubs. Those are my awards predictions from the American League and the National League.
Yeah, we got some same picks here, but it's so easy to go judging Ohtani, and I just like to have a little bit more fun. And so some of this is kind of tied into the teams I pick going to the playoffs. So I've got out of nowhere MVP Nick Kurtz of the A's.
Wow. Okay.
It's tough as a first baseman, obviously, but he did have a 170 WRC plus as a rookie. If he does better than that, look out. And then I have Ronald Acuna Jr. making a great comeback, leading the Braves to the World Series. In the Cy Young race, I have Garrett Crochet for Boston, and I also picked Christopher Sanchez for the Phillies. He looked awfully good today. In the Rookies of the Year, I've got Kevin McGonigle. I'm just sticking with him, and JJ Weatherholt of the Cardinals. I think when you got guys who can play middle infield and hit, I think they got a good chance to rack up a lot of WAR and win Rookie of the Year. And then my managers go to the surprise playoff teams, Mark Kotsay of the A's and Walt Weiss of the Braves.
Perfect. All right, everybody. It is time to get out of here. That is all we have for this bonus episode on the Days of Ver podcast. Special thank you to our producer, the Magic Man, Robin Chan. He is the best in the business for putting in the extra work to edit and publish this episode. Check back for our regular hour-long episode, which drops Monday. Until then, go in peace.